Let's take a look now at LMN's CRM function. CRM stands for Customer Relationship Management. And what it allows you to do is manage your customer and your lead information as leads come into your business. On the dashboard here, you'll be able to see when your leads have been added. So track your leads as they get added by day. And it'll show you the past 30 days and how many new leads have come in. You'll also be able to track your estimate status, how much sales revenue you have sitting in pending estimates, sold estimates, and estimates that have been lost. You'll see your overdue or upcoming to-do items, which are basically just tasks that you have to either complete or sign off to somebody else. And you'll be able to also track the recent leads you've added to the system, where your best referral sources are coming from, and popular tags you've may added to clients. Now here in the clients and leads section, we'll take you through a clients and leads screen. But first you can see a list of all your clients and leads, look at them by alphabet, search for them, or filter by any one of these filter tags. Here, when I open a client lead information, I can see when we last made contact with them based on our communication history, the total estimates we've done for this lead, and whether it's been estimated, sold, or lost. Here for the Acetos, I've got their information here in terms of name and street, etc. I've identified them as either a lead or a client. I can assign them if I want to somebody specifically in my company, and I can also track where they heard of us from. So for instance, if they found us via our Google ad, I can put website referral and referral note Google ad. I can also add tags to this customer. So if I want to say they're a maintenance prospect, I could set up a tag called prospect maintenance and hit add. And now whenever I wanted to make a list of all my clients who are maintenance prospects or leads that are maintenance prospects, I can simply pull a list for that tag. Moving forward, I can also create different contacts at my lead. So I could have one or multiple contact people along with email and phone numbers for each person related to this lead. I could have one or more job sites related to this lead. That could be for a residential customer, just their home, but for a commercial customer, it could be multiple properties representing multiple job sites. The estimates view will show me all the estimates I've made for this lead, and I can just click this to open the estimate. And then communication history allows my staff to enter things like communication notes. So by filling out a communication note here, and we'll show you one that's been completed, I'm basically showing everybody in the company that this happened on such and such a date via email, so that if someone else is trying to answer a question for the client, they have our communication history here all in one place. I've also got a to-dos list, and to-dos are things that need to be done for this client that I can either assign to myself with a due date or assign to somebody else. Here I've assigned this to-do to George Franklin. Now I can see he marked it as complete on December 29th, and this was the list that had to be done. Here I've got a to-do that I assigned to myself with a little note about what it needs to be done. When it is done, I'll mark this as complete, and it'll track the date that it was completed versus the date it was due. And then I'll click Save to mark those changes as complete. You can also see your to-do items over here on the left side with your to-do list. Anything showing up in red is overdue. Anything in black is upcoming in the next week or so. You've also got a couple of views on your to-do screen, including urgent stuff, recently completed stuff, upcoming to-dos, or just a list of all the to-dos that have ever been created or assigned to you. Down here, you can see I can set up tags to organize my customers or clients into lists, and referral sources so I can track where our leads or clients heard from us. And I can also do some sales revenue reporting based on these referral sources. LMN's CRM tool gives you a powerful customer management tool, just enough for most landscape companies without being too complicated. You can very quickly enter a lead, track communication information about them, build an estimate, and all the information is stored in one easy-to-find place for anyone in your organization that has access to the CRM functions. Now we're looking at LMN's budgeting software. The budgeting software is important. It's where LMN all started. As a landscape contractor ourselves, we were looking for a tool that would allow us to build a budget so that we could set profitable goals for sales, and what we should spend on wages for field staff, and what our overhead was, and how much we could afford to spend on equipment, etc., and still make a fair profit. But on top of that, we also needed an overhead recovery system so that we could make sure that for all our estimates across the board, no matter who was estimating, we weren't just guessing at prices. Each job had a very specific cost, overhead recovery, and profit margin, all designed to help us recover our company's overhead and hit the sales goals that we set. So the budgeting software became LMN. And in fact, you need a budget before you can even build an estimate in LMN, because LMN needs to know how much overhead you have and what your costs are in order to give you the right price to hit your sales goal. Let's take a look at the budget software now. You're going to start out on this budget information tab. And the first thing you're going to want to do is enter your mix of work. Now, this is percent of sales from some different types of work that we do in the green industry. So design, build, install, and maintenance, and irrigation and snow. By identifying here where your sales are coming from in terms of work types, we can benchmark your company's numbers against similar numbers from companies that do similar mixes of work. So you could then compare, I'm spending certain percentage of my sales on my field labor, and the industry average spends this percentage. And are you better than or worse than the industry average? And it'll help pinpoint problems and inefficiencies in your company and areas where you need to make improvement. This is a really important section to start with. It'll help you a lot along the way towards building a more profitable budget. You're going to start, though, with a sales forecast. And a sales forecast is the sales goal that you're going to want to hit the following year. Everything in LMN is based off forecast numbers. We're going to try to get you to a specific sales goal and hit a certain profit margin in the year. And that's what we're going to build in our budget. So all the pricing is going to be designed not necessarily on what you did last year, but what you'd like to do going forward. So we'll set up our forecast sales, and then from there, set up our forecast field labor. Now here you're going to enter things like your labor burden, which is your percentage you pay on payroll tax, etc., what your overtime multiplier is, and then fill out the roles required to hit the sales goal you put back here and the number of people required at each role. So here I've got a budget for 2 construction foremen and 4 laborers. I've also budgeted for their regular and overtime hours per year, enter their average wage and a bonus if applicable. And now over here, I've got total wages per year by position. Once I've got my field labor budget complete, it'll benchmark what I'm spending on field labor versus what the industry average spends on field labor. And if I'm lower than the industry average, that's a good thing. It means my field staff are more productive than the industry average. If I'm higher than this industry average, then it's telling me my field staff aren't quite as productive, or I'm not estimating or charging enough for my field work. Once you're done your field labor budget, you can click over to the equipment budget. And here's where you're going to build a really handy tool to make sure you're recovering all your equipment costs. All too common in this industry, contractors give their equipment away, especially when it's paid for. It doesn't seem like it has a cost, but it does have a cost, and one day you're going to need to replace it. So LMN's tools are built to help you come up with the right cost to replace your current equipment. You start with a replacement value, years you're going to expect to own it, what it's worth at the end of its life, and LMN will feed you a number per month and per year that you need to recover in your estimates to make sure that you're recovering the cost of your crew trucks and your mini X's and your skid steers, and even stuff like maintenance trailers, where you can build a whole group package of trailer and riding mower and walk behind and push mower and all the quantity, purchase price, resale value, so that we can arrive at how much per year do you need to recover from your paying customers in order to replace the wear and tear coming on your equipment. You can also build a budget for your fuel and your repairs and your insurance. And going forward into estimating, we'll have cost calculators that'll make sure we calculate the right price per hour and per day to cover all these costs of your equipment. Then you build a materials budget. In the materials budget, you're going to forecast what you're going to need to spend on materials to hit the sales goal that you put up here. It's not as complicated as it might seem. Year over year, you probably spend a very similar percentage of your sales on material expenses. And so you can keep using that percentage going forward to build forecasts. And you can build quite accurate material forecasts from there. You'll also want to build a budget for your subcontractors, what you're going to spend on subs, and a budget for your overhead. And overhead is sort of the all-important budget in this one. Here's where we're going to put in all our non-estimated costs, as well as our non-estimated wages. So these are people that may work in the office whose time we don't estimate on jobs. And all our overhead equipment, which is, again, equipment that doesn't find its way into estimates, but needs to get recovered, like the owner's truck or the operations manager truck. And these have calculators as well to make sure that we've got the right amount for each one of these pieces of equipment. Finally, once you've got all that entered, you'll end up with a forecast profit and loss. If all these things happen, this is how much money you stand to make. And when you're happy with this number, you're done and ready to move on. But for many companies, here's where they're going to have to go back and make some tweaks and try to move some expenses or sales around until you've got a happy net income and a happy net profit margin. Once you're happy, you can move to overhead recovery. An LMN here will calculate some overhead recovery systems common in the industry specific to your numbers. So if you like Charles Vanderkoy's, you can set up a multiple overhead recovery system using the industry standard percentages, and it'll calculate how you need to mark up your labor, equipment, materials, and subs to recover all your company's overhead that you put in your overhead budget. If you like the Frank Ross system, a double overhead recovery system, you can customize the numbers to get to those same ratios as well. Or you can use Jim Houston's field labor overhead recovery system, or just a single overhead recovery system common with most accountants. We certainly at LMN have our own preferences for what we think is the most profitable, but regardless of what system you choose, you now have an overhead recovery markup system that takes your company's overhead and makes sure it's going to be built into your estimates so that you can make sure all your overhead expenses are covered and you're not just guessing when you estimate. Finally, you can move to the Analysis tab. And on the Analysis tab, LMN will show you where your sales are going, what your total revenue per man hour on your jobs should average based on a certain percentage of unbillable time, and also what your company capacity is, what you really should have done in sales had you billed all your labor, equipment, materials, and subs properly. And it'll also rate your efficiency on how much of your sales you're realizing based on your potential. Now here I've got a budget that's good and it's 10% profit, so I don't have any warnings here. But if you've got some expenses that stand out to LMN, it'll also prompt you for that. For instance, let's pretend my overhead's too high. And we'll go back here and we'll jack one of our overhead expenses way up. If I come back to the Analysis tab here, it just detected now that my overhead ratio is higher than average. And it's asked me some questions that may lead me to fix the problem. Now, maybe your overhead problem is a real problem, or maybe it's just a data entry problem and you put something in the wrong spot. So that's what these questions will try to ask you. It'll try to guide you towards how to fix the issues that it detected with your profitable budget. It also detected that my profit and loss wasn't quite where I'd like it to be. It's only at 6%. So it does some recommendations here as well to help you fix that. Now, once you go through LMN's tools and you use the Analysis tool and you make the suggested fixes or tweaks to your budget, and what you'll end up with is a good budget, hopefully, a profitable budget, hopefully, that you can then use going forward to price your work, to make sure that every time any estimator in your company hands over a bid for a job, that bid has the right amount of overhead recovery and profit to make this budget become a reality. When your budget's set up and complete, you're ready to now set up your cost and price database. The cost and price database doesn't have to be set up first, but it's going to save you tons of time when you're estimating. Basically, it'll create standardized costs and prices for your crews, your equipment, your materials, your subs, all the things that you do estimate, so that when your estimators are estimating, all they need to do is pull these in from your database instead of entering them one at a time for every job. Now, LMN's got a lot of tools to help make sure that you've got the right price on all your bids. And most of that information is here in the item catalog. Let's take a look at a labor item called construction labor. Here I've got it called construction labor, but over here I've got all the costs associated with labor, starting with an average wage. The calculator here will help calculate your average wage based on what you pay your laborers and what you pay your foremen, and on average what that works out to be per hour. It'll also add an overtime factor, an unbillable factor, banking on the fact that you're going to pay your employees for a lot more hours than you're actually going to estimate. So we're going to put in an unbillable factor to recover that time. Labor burden, which is payroll tax, workers' comp, etc. And then it's also going to add an overhead markup, and it's pulling that from your company's budget. So whatever your markup was on labor, it's going to pull that in here to make sure that all the costs of payroll are covered here, your company's overhead is covered here, and you arrive at a break even per man hour. Now it's just profit. So if I pull the default profit margin from my budget, which mine was 10%, I know that I need to charge my labor out at $46.96 per man hour to cover all my costs, to cover my company's overhead, and to make the profit or hit the sales goal that I set back in my budget. Now, of course, you can change this by setting a custom profit margin. So if I want to make 20%, it'll recalculate that. Or I can set it to a fixed price, like I want to charge $50 an hour, and it'll tell me what my profit margin is at that price as well. So you're completely customizable or flexible in how you set up your items, but LMN's going to tell you that based on a fixed price or based on the price that it'll tell you, here's how much overhead you're going to recover, and here's how much money you're making on that thing. So we're going to set up different types of labor, mostly just for different crews that have different average wages. And then you've got enough information to estimate. Simply pull labor into a bid on a job, and it already knows what the costs are and what your overhead is. And your estimator doesn't have to see all the details of the budget to make sure they're using the right price. You're also going to want to set up an equipment catalog. And the equipment catalog has a list of all the equipment that may go out to jobs. And again, just like the labor, each piece of equipment has a screen that then works out its costs. So based on how much you use the equipment, what you pay to buy it, how long you keep it, what it's worth at the end of its life, and how much you spend on maintenance, insurance, and fuel, it'll give you an hourly cost or a daily cost for this equipment so that you can then mark it up for overhead recovery and profit and hit the sales goals that you're looking to hit. And make sure your equipment's covering all the costs associated, including depreciation, fuel, maintenance, repairs, etc. We also have a materials catalog, and this is probably going to be your longest list of stuff. Here's where you're going to enter all your materials, but you can group it by categories to make things easier to find. And you can very easily do searches up here to limit your list as well. Now you can import your material categories and your materials from spreadsheets, which make it a lot easier so that you don't have to enter 1,000 or 2,000 items manually. Get your material vendors to supply you with a spreadsheet, including material names and costs that represents their catalog. You can import here into LMN that same catalog, and as well customize some information like how much profit margin you want to make on these vendors' materials, so that all you need to do is import a spreadsheet and it'll create all your material list for you. The subs list is a list of your subcontractors that you might use on estimating. And we can keep this really simple, even for subs that do per job pricing. So we can set up a sub with a flat price and a unit cost of 0, but set a target profit margin so that when an estimator adds this sub to an estimate, all they have to do is fill in the price the sub gave them for that particular job, and it'll automatically mark it up appropriately. You also have an other catalog, which is useful for things like commissions or credits or discounts or rentals. And finally, we can set up one of the most valuable things when it comes to LMN estimating, which is called work area templates. A work area template gives estimators a checklist of all the items that they're going to need to think about whenever they estimate a certain style of work. For instance, this is a template for a paver driveway. What I've done here is added all the items from my catalog, my labor, my equipment, my materials, etc., in a list for paver driveways, so that no matter who's estimating the driveway in my company, all the estimators are going through the same checklist of items. In fact, you can take it beyond a checklist. You can even establish production rates so that each estimator knows that every 100 square feet of driveway requires 3.7 ton of gravel. Or on the brick sand, 450 square feet of pavers requires 1 ton of brick sand. And that way, when they're building their estimates, all they have to do is enter the size of the driveway, and it'll help calculate things like gravel or sand or even labor if you want to put a calculation on labor. Templates are one of the most valuable things you can set up for estimating, because you can also set them up to have customer notes, which will show up on your customer proposals, and crew notes, which will show up on your crew job planners, so that if you've got something like a small tool checklist you want to make sure the crews have on board the trucks before they leave the yard in the morning to do this work, you can build it right here in your template so that every time you use this template on a job, this small tool checklist will automatically get inserted in that job's planner for the crews. Setting up your item catalog can not only help save tons of mistakes, as you can see in the templates, and forgotten items, but can also make sure that across any estimator in your company, you're all estimating with the costs and prices designed to help you hit your sales goal so that you're truly estimating and not guesstimating. Now let's take a look at LMN's estimating. Now, LMN's probably not the simplest tool for estimating, but if you want a simple tool, an Excel spreadsheet's probably fine. What LMN is designed to do is take the guesstimating out of estimating and to make sure that you get the right price on every job. You'll clearly see with our tools what every job really costs, how much overhead it should recover, and what the right price for that job should be to help you not only cover your costs and your overhead, but also to help you hit the sales goal that you put forth in your budget. So let's take a look and see how that works now. Here I am on the estimating dashboard, and here we can get some quick metrics on some of our estimate data, like how much in terms of dollar value have we estimated by division, how many hours have we estimated by division, how many estimates or what the value is in the last 6 months, what our revenue per hour is on our different types of estimates, and what our closing rates are for estimates. Next up here, I'm going to set up some default budgets. So these are the budgets that we're going to use when we build our estimates. Now I can change it for any estimate, but these will be the defaults, the one we're starting with. Next up is a standard estimate. Now a standard estimate is for design, build, or install work. A service estimate is for recurring work like lawn mowing or snow plowing. Here in standard, I'm going to open a sample estimate so you can see the details. And here I've got some basic information about the estimate and about the client. Here in the estimate information, I can assign an estimate to a division, which you can create and customize, but you can also create and customize what we call estimate statuses. What these will allow you to do is to set up a sales pipeline from first call all the way through to final billing. And you can set these up any way you want. You can have as many or as few as you need. But each one of these statuses has a status of either pending, sold, or lost, so that you can do some sales closing rate reporting on your estimates as well. Over here is the client information. This is what links back to our CRM or customer relationship management tool. You've also got some handy links down here, such as a site measuring tool. So online, you can pull up a site, draw areas, and it'll measure for it. A map, which will pull up a street map to this job, and a way to change the lead or contact if an estimate's ever changed or you accidentally pick the wrong one. You can assign salespeople, estimators, a confidence level to this estimate, and it'll show you here who the last person to estimate it was as well. But let's dive into the pricing part of the estimate. Here under work areas and pricing, you can create work areas for every subtotal that you want on this estimate. So for example, my total price on this estimate is $26,000. But if I want to break it down to the client by patio and driveway and garden and lighting, each one of those is going to be a work area. Inside each work area, you've got a list of labor, equipment, materials required to get that work area done, including quantities, what it costs and what the price is, and how much profit you're making. So each work area will show exactly how much you're making on every single thing you're doing on the job. Now I can customize my quantities, my prices, my costs any way I see fit, but I'll end up with a very accurate price for my estimates on the job. You can also use the hold button here to make options. So for instance, I've got the hold button on this premium paver driveway, meaning when I put something on hold, it's excluded from the estimate. Right now, my estimate's $26,600. If I take the premium paver off hold and put the basic paver on hold, I've got two different options for driveway here. I've got a new price now of $34,100. Now, the premium paver is essentially the same labor and equipment as we used on the basic driveway, except it had perhaps a more expensive paver down here. Now, you can also create work areas for things like garden or pergola. You can create things like lighting, which should include transformers, wires. But the goal of this is not only to get the right price, but to also turn this information into a job planner for foremen, so that foremen maybe can't see the cost and prices, but can see exactly how many hours, what equipment, and what materials have been estimated to get this job done on time and on budget. It's a really handy tool for taking the information out of the head of the person who priced the job and putting it into the hands of the people like foremen who are working on jobs. Now, making an estimate is really simple. Let's add another work area called Driveway 2 just to show you how we built that first driveway. Once you add a work area to an estimate, you go to Add Items and Templates, and that pulls all the items from the estimating catalog that we built earlier. So here's my labor, here's my equipment, and here's all my materials. So to add things to the estimate, all I do is pick the crew that's going to work on the job, what equipment we're going to need for the job, and then the materials I'm going to need as well. I'll go through that and pick for anything I need. If I accidentally pick something I don't need, in this case, I simply hit the delete button and get it out of there. Now that's one way to build an estimate. And as you build this up, I can now just set the labor and the crew and the equipment, and it'll arrive at a price for me. But even easier than this is to set up templates. Once you've set up a template for an item, you can go here to Templates, and I'll go down to that paver driveway we built in the estimating catalog example. And when I click this template, all the labor, equipment, materials that I'm going to need to estimate a driveway come in here along with their calculators. So for example, if I wanted to work out how much gravel I'm going to need on this driveway, I'll hit this calculator. In the template, I said we need 3.7 ton every 100 square feet. So I'll say here the driveway is 1,100 square feet, and it's going to tell me I need 40.7, or rounded up, 41 tons. And that's the way I would build my estimate here. filling out the quantities. And once I'm done with the add items panel, I can get rid of it. And then I'll get all my pricing information back here. So I can fill out my quantities, my units, my cost. I can override pricing. I can take the profit up or down any way I want. Of course, it's going to use my defaults, but that's how to build an estimate. So very quickly, using the Add Items button, your estimators are just pulling in things that are already cost and priced in your catalog and using them to build a very accurate and very consistent price for all the work you do. Moving along, we have client notes, and client notes are the notes that are going to show up on the customer proposals. So each work area or each subtotal of the job has its own set of client notes. If you open up the Driveway 2 client notes that I just built, you'll see there's some client notes already in here, even though I just created this Driveway 2. The reason? It came from the work area template. When you set up these notes in your work area template, you'll automatically have your notes come over for client proposals and what we'll get to next with our job planners for the crews. If I click the crew notes section, each one of my work areas has a set of notes for the crews. And here's where we can show things like small tool checklist and paver installation specifications for the crews. Again, this came directly from my template, or I could type it in or tweak it manually from here as well. The analysis screen will break down the job for me in terms of price, cost of goods, profit, overhead, break even, show me my ratios of costs, and also compare my budget to my estimate in terms of what my budgeted gross profit is and what the gross profit is on this estimate, what my budgeted net profit is and the net profit on this estimate, and what our revenue per hour is, both budgeted and estimated as well. Finally, when I'm ready to produce a proposal for a client, I just go print, pick the customer proposal, and note that there's all kinds of different layouts. You can include more or less details, however you see fit to present the client. Pick the one that suits you best, hit print, and all the information we put in the estimate will be generated in a PDF along with our logo, an information header, and information about each different subtotal. You can also set up default terms and conditions in LMN so that all your contract terms and conditions automatically come out on your proposals as well. Service estimates are essentially the same thing as standard estimates with only one difference. They have these two fields called visits and bill per visit. So here, if I jump to the services and pricing section, what I've got here is a number of visits and a billing type for each different service that we're going to provide. So if mowing is going to be part of our seasonal price or our monthly payment, I'm going to set that to per season. But on our spring cleanup, if I want to bill that as soon as it's complete, I can set that billing type to per visit. Inside these things are the same things you saw in the construction estimate. It's just the crews and the equipment and the materials from our cost and price database. As we add these to the estimate, it'll automatically pull in the right cost and what we need to charge for them. All I need to do is fill out how long or what equipment or how much material we're going to need for the specific job. Once you've got that, you've got a crystal clear cost, break even, and price for all your service work as well. And the billing type and the visits will make sure it gets exported to QuickBooks properly, or it gets made sure that you present the customer with an accurate pricing system so that some services could be built into the monthly or seasonal billing plan, and other services could be excluded from that billing plan and be billed as they happen. The terms and conditions section of LMN's estimating will allow us to set up exactly that. Default terms and conditions, text that we can choose to pull into estimates at any time. By setting it up here, it's a lot faster to add it as an estimate or to an estimate, since I only need to click a button that says Add Terms and Conditions, and I can automatically pick from my list here. I can also set up default terms and conditions, and these are terms and conditions that will show up every time I make an estimate. For instance, if on my standard estimates I want to show my contract footer, then under my standard footer, I can include all my contract terms and conditions that I like to include on a standard or construction style estimate. Estimate statuses is where you set up your estimating sales pipeline so you can track your estimates by status and whether they're pending, lost, or sold. Cost codes allow you to set up things that link with QuickBooks so that when I export the revenue from estimates or the expenses from time, it'll get booked to the right department in QuickBooks. And divisions allow me to separate my estimate by divisions so that I can see how much revenue we're doing in each different division of my company. You can set these up any way you see fit, although LMN comes with some shipped for you. Now we take a look at the LMN Systems Library, which is a really unique tool. The Systems Library was created in our own landscape company. And as we grew our company from just a backyard startup to one of the North America's top 100 landscape companies, we had to build our systems along the way, which meant we had to do things that we never did when we were smaller, like have employee files and build employee evaluation systems and have an employee handbook and all those things that as you grow in people, you need to keep controls in the business. Now, the LMN Systems Library contains over 700 documents, policies, procedures, and checklists that we built for our own landscape company and put into LMN. All these policies and procedures and checklists are organized into compartments, and then over here are the documents themselves. Just about all the documents are saved as Word documents or Excel files, so that you can take these documents, open them up, change them to suit your business, and then save them for use, and then you've got them. Instead of having to create the whole system from scratch, you basically can take our systems, tweak them, and make them yours. We've got some human resource procedures that include everything from job descriptions to a recruiting and hiring procedure. We've got design build systems for selling work, right from the first meeting to lead qualification to what to bring to a master plan meeting. And then we've got all kinds of documents for organizing the shop, health and safety training, every company policy and procedure that we've required to run our company, and many, many more. They're all here for you to download,
Time is far more
customize,
than just a
and
time
turn into
tracking
your
or
own.
payroll tool. LMN Time is really a job management tool that happens to also do payroll. The goal of LMN Time is to track time for our employees so that we can pay them accurately. However, the goal is to track their time back to a job, project, or task, whether it's a customer or internal job, so that we know where every single one of our hours is getting spent, and so that we can stay on top at any time of day or night of our work that's happening in the field and see exactly that things are going as planned or not. Let's take a look at that last job as a starting point. Here I'm going to go to jobs, and once I've built that estimate, I can import that estimate into LMN Time to set it up for time tracking. To do so, I'll go down here and I'll click import, and then I'll search for the job that we just created. There's Chuck and Denise Neville with their backyard pool and garden, and I'm going to bring that into LMN Time. Here it brings in a bunch of tasks. Some are from the estimate, and some are default tasks that I've created to automatically get added to the job. For instance, I may want to track things like changes and extras, or material deliveries, or project management time, and these things I didn't necessarily include on the estimate. I've set these up as default tasks so that they automatically get included in all my jobs, but I can choose now whether I want to import those or not on this specific job. Here are the other tasks for the job, but note backyard lighting wasn't ticked off. And it wasn't ticked because we had put the backyard lighting on hold before we imported it here. I'm going to import this job now, and what it'll do is create for me a job and customer description. It'll geocode the latitude and longitude so that when my crews are clocking in and out of this job, I'll be able to make sure they were either at the job or very close to it when they did so. And then if I go to the tasks, you'll see that each task I set up in my estimate comes over as a task for time tracking in LMN Time, so that when my crews clock into this job, they'll have to organize their time by pool or patio or garden. Now in this case, I had two sections of the job. I had a back patio section that had an economy paver and a back patio with a premium paver. And maybe this is too detailed. I don't necessarily need my crew to split their time between the economy and the premium paver. I just want to know how long the back patio took. So I can tick these two tasks off and down here hit merge. And merge will allow me to create one line item called back patio using the hardscape and cost code and the total number of hours for both these tasks. This is a really important step to get accurate job costing. Sometimes we give the customer a fair amount of detail when we're giving them a proposal, but that level of detail is far too great when you're asking your crews to break up the time. Let's face it, the last thing we want is the foreman pulling out his phone every minute and switching what task he's working on so that he can keep accurate job costing for his crew. Now I've got a simpler list of tasks, and this will be a much easier list to manage for my foreman, but also gives me enough information to know where we went right and possibly where we went wrong on the estimate. If this job had stuff that was billed by the hour, we could also set up hourly rates. Or if I wanted to track whether things got finished, I could also set up activities for this job that would allow me to do that as well. Once I've got the job tracked, my crews in the field are ready to clock into the job. So using any smartphone, crews could go to the timesheet section. Now they won't see as much information as we're seeing here on the screen. This is for you, the administrator. Crews can basically do two things: configure the people in their crew that day and add timesheets. The goal of LMN Time is to also have the foreman fill out the timesheet for his entire crew, so that you don't have to have a smartphone in the hands of all your employees, and you don't need to approve 3 or 4 timesheets for each crew, especially when all their time would be the same. The crew clocks in like this. In the morning, they create a timesheet, and it'll automatically pick the date for them. When their timesheet starts, down here they're going to click clock in. And in the morning, they might first clock into the yard and shop for work they did around there. That's okay. Down here, they'll clock into shop. So even though it's not a customer job, crews could clock into a job called shop, which is your job. Then they'd identify who's in their crew that day. So these 3 employees showed up as automatically highlighted because I, as a foreman, had them set up as my default crew. But it doesn't mean I'm stuck with them. If Greg's off sick today and we take Dave instead, it's an easy switch. Clicking next brings me to the task. So it knows what job we're working on. Now it's asking me what task are we doing? Loading, unloading, and driving, yard and equipment maintenance, deliveries and pickups, and meetings. So you set up the task that you want to track for the shop, and then your crews will be forced to pick one of those tasks to allocate their time to. I'll say we're all loading, unloading, and driving, and we'll hit next. Now it pulls the date and the time from the timesheet. I'm filming this video in the afternoon, and normally we'd be clocking in the morning, so I'll do that. Now I'm doing this on purpose because a foreman is free to set their time whenever is accurate. And sometimes they're going to forget to clock into the job and they may have to go back and set it differently than it actually was. They'll have the ability to do that. However, you'll also have the ability to see what time it was when they did it and where they were standing when they did that. So that if you have foremen who are constantly adjusting their timesheets, you know that something's going on and should probably be investigated. So we start at the morning at 7:35, and I can start employees at different times as well. If you have a foreman who starts earlier and then the other 2 employees start later, that's fine. LMN Time can handle that as well. We just repeat the same process for the employees after we've done the foreman in the morning. Now let's pretend we're all moving to our first job. You don't need to clock out of the shop. You simply need to go down here and clock into the job that you're working on now. I'll jump to that Neville Pool and Water feature job and hit next. And we'll clock in Dave and Marcus and Mike to that job as well. Now it asks us, are we working on the swimming pool, the back patio, the lighting, or the garden? Only the tasks that we chose to get set up on the job are going to show up here. Let's say we're working on the swimming pool. I'll hit next. And then I'm going to again pick the date and time. So the date and time will default to the phone's date and time. But once again, just to make this realistic, I'm going to back this up to the morning and pretend we got to the job at 8:41. Now you can see my crew is clocked into the Neville Water feature. So we were at the shop loading and unloading from 7:35 to 8:41. And then from 8:41, and the out time is blank, which means we're still clocked in, we've been working on the swimming pool and water feature. Now remember, when we set up the Neville pool, we set up an estimated hours for that pool. So how does the crew know whether they're on track or not? Well, they can click the magnifying glass here, and they can see we've estimated 450 hours, and we've used up 18.15 already, which means we're 4% used up the hours that have been estimated. LMN Time gives the crew and the office a live, real-time update of the exact estimated versus actual man hours on the job. In this case, I've had 3 guys clocked in from 8:41 in the morning, and right now it's about 2:38 in the afternoon. So totaling up all those man hours tells us that we've now used 18.2 man hours on this job to date, and we're still 4% done. As the day increases, so too will the actual hours and the status complete. But it gives the crew the ability, without having to ask for any questions or have any company meetings or be handed any reports, your foreman will have the ability to see exactly where they stand on the job to help them manage the job getting done on time. At the end of the day, the crew will clock out using the clock out button. And again, they can clock out different people at different times. That's not an issue. I'll clock out here at 2:38. We'll call it an early day, and we'll say today we worked on the excavation. Now you can require task notes at the end of every day, or you can not require them. It's up to you. It's an option you can turn off or on. I prefer them on because it gives me a picture of what the crews did each day. Now when they click save, they've got one more step left, and that's to submit the timesheet. Right now this timesheet is showing up as in progress, meaning for the foreman, they're still working on it. When the foreman's done, they're going to go down here and they're going to click submit. And now it'll try to automatically apply a lunch deduction for the time and duration they took lunch. So if we broke at 12:30 for 30 minutes, I'll approve that and hit submit. Now it'll show for the foreman the in time, out time, and total hours for each employee on the timesheet. And then when they click save, they'll be able to submit that to the office. What the office sees the next day is something like this. They'll go timesheet, approve time, and there's that timesheet I just filled out, ready for review and approval because its status is submitted. However, if you see this little red pen here, it indicates that the foreman has made some manual edits to the actual date and time. So I can click the audit button, and the audit button shows me that the foreman, which in this case was me in this video, clocked in at 7:35, but it was really 2:35 in the afternoon. If I click the maps button, I can see exactly where that foreman was when they did this clock in and out. Once in a while, it's going to happen. Your foremen are going to forget to clock in or out when they should have. And so they can fix it on live in their timesheets. However, when they do that, you're going to be well aware of exactly what time it really was and where the foreman was really standing when they did that. So no more sitting at the coffee shop and saying you were at the job. If I flip back to the jobs now, I'll be able to open the Neville job and see exactly where we stand for each task. And if I click the review button here, you'll see that the swimming pool so far had 16 out of 450 hours completed to date, which means it's 3% done, and the estimated hours are 590 out of 16.4. As an estimator or project manager, I now have the power to click on any estimate that we're working on and then hit the review button to see exactly where we stand in terms of estimated versus actual hours across all the work that should happen on that job, total estimated, total actual hours for the whole job, and then down here, a link to every timesheet that's ever been filled out against this job. For those of you doing maintenance and service work, you'll actually also be able to open a job and go to the history button. And if I want a history of my snow plowing and salting activity, I can click this button and there's every date and time that we visited the job for snow plowing, the date we were there, the supervisor that did it or the foreman that did the work, any comments they left, the weather, and any activities that they noted. You can set your jobs up for activities so that you can track things that are over and above just time. What we showed you in the simple timesheet a few minutes ago was just how foremen clock in and out for their time. But oftentimes we want more information from that back from the field. For instance, you may want to know if they put down mulch or they put down salt in the wintertime. You can create a job and also create things called activities. Here I've got a maintenance contract and I want to track how many bags of fertilizer the crew put down, how much mulch they put down, or if they installed flats of annuals, that they did that work so that I can bill it. Crews won't see the rates that you're charging. They'll simply be prompted when clocking out, did you put down any of these three things? They'll tick off yes that they did. If the track quantity is on, they'll enter the number that they did, and then LMN can generate a report that shows for you exactly what work got done at what sites. LMN Time also comes with a scheduling application. And under the scheduling application, you can schedule your work on different days for different crews and also get a picture of the work assigned to each crew each day. For instance, if I jump the whiteboard ahead to Monday, I can see here all the work that's been assigned to my crews to date. Install B crew has 2 jobs assigned to it. That's not going to work. So I'll grab one job and I'll drag it over here to install crew A. Now they'll be assigned to do that job on that day, and install B will be on a different job. I've got one over here sitting and unassigned, and maybe I want my Hort crew to do that. So same thing, I'll just drag and drop it over to my Hort crew. And you can see at the top, it shows the estimated hours scheduled for each crew in each day. My lawn crew has 8 hours and 47 minutes worth of work, so I know they've got a full day here. When they clock in on their timesheet, if they click scheduled, it will show my crew a list of jobs that have been assigned for them that day, and then they can just pick their times from that list of jobs. You can also use the optimize routes button to set up an optimized route. So here I've got the 3 jobs they need to hit. When I click optimize routes, it'll put it in the best driving order based on Google Maps. I'll hit save changes and the schedule will update based on the changes that I've saved so that the job sites will now show up on the crew's timesheet in the order I want the work done. When the crew finishes the job in the field, they'll also get asked a question. Did you complete this work or not? When they say they completed the work will then show up as complete, and it will track the date and the foreman that marked it as complete. Live on your schedule board, you'll see a check mark ticked off to indicate that work was done as completed. And also on all schedule reporting and job reporting, you'll see that that scheduled visit was completed on said day by said foreman, depending on who did the job and when. Lots of other things you can do with LMN Time. Because it's cloud-based and because everything in LMN Time is real-time, not only are we tracking the hours for the crew, but we can also stay on top of day-to-day operations. And because LMN Time is a live, real-time time tracking software, everything the crews are doing in the field is instantly transmitted back to the office for up-to-the-minute information about all the jobs. So as crews clock in and out of jobs, you'll see who's been where. And I can go to timesheets and latest activity to see this. It'll actually show me which foreman clocked in at what time, and in a click of a button, I can view the timesheet as they fill it out. I can also go to my jobs menu and go to job site history to see job information as it happens. So if I get a call from a customer about were you here today or were you here last night, in a couple clicks of the mouse, my office staff can view that, which is important for keeping my overhead lean and mean. Or if I click on the staff menu, I can turn on the daily dashboard and see where each employee has been all day. For instance, I can click Dave Barr here and see, well, he clocked in at 7:35 until 8:41 he was at the shop. And then he was working at the Neville pool from 8:41 to 2:38. That's the timesheet we just filled out moments ago on our screen. As your crew fills it out live, you'll see the information live being transmitted back to your screen. And at the end of all this, you can go to reports and you can generate reports for payroll that indicate each employee's hours, and that'll include calculations for overtime, etc. You can also run job reports to see how many hours were spent by job. You can run billing reports to see if you had hours that were billable, like time and material work, reports for that, or how to bill for activities that were completed, like mulch installed or salt applied. Scheduling reports show us the number of visits that were completed and not completed by job, and the dashboard gives us a big picture of all the jobs that we currently have in progress and what the estimated versus actual hours are. A really handy war board, if you will, to show you your current status of all your jobs. For those of you using payroll software, there's an exports menu that'll generate export files for paychecks and ADP payroll for those of you who have those systems that do support import-export. Not all their versions do, so check with your payroll provider that they do. LMN also includes an Excel payroll export, which integrates with many payroll vendors. If they can import payroll information from a spreadsheet or CSV file, we're generating that payroll information in that format to allow LMN time information to import into many different payroll software settings. If you use QuickBooks, LMN Time will sync with QuickBooks automatically. So behind the scenes, it'll send all the hours as well as the jobs that were worked on into QuickBooks so that not only can QuickBooks Payroll pay your employees, but that every minute of the employee's time will get job costs to the jobs that the employees worked on during those times. So that right out of QuickBooks, I can see a to-the-penny accurate breakdown of what I spent in labor on every job in my company, including shop and office time. You know it's going to be to-the-penny accurate because it's going to be exactly the same data that was used to generate the paychecks for the employees. And unless an employee forgets to clock themselves in, you know your payroll report's going to be accurate. The nice thing about having a job costing system that relies on payroll is that LMN Time uses payroll and job costing together as an advantage. In many systems, you've got a punch card system where employees punch in and out on a punch card and then write their hours on a piece of paper for job costing. And what inevitably happens is that the punch clock is right because that's how the employees get paid. And then they write whatever they feel like writing on a piece of paper, which is usually full of mistakes and inaccuracies. Here, using LMN Time, we've created a system that does job costing from the payroll information. Employees are going to track their time correctly because they want to get paid for the hours that they worked. But because every hour they worked gets tracked back to a task, QuickBooks or whatever your job costing system can tell you exactly what it cost on every task, on every job in labor. And LMN Time can always produce reports in terms of up-to-the-minute labor hours on every job and task so that you know exactly where you stand at any time of any day. That draws us to the end of our 10,000-foot overview of the LMN estimating, budgeting, and time tracking system. If you have any questions in regards to what you've seen, you can head over to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/LMN video and see all kinds of videos of the software in action. There's hundreds of hours of information to watch there. Or maybe you have questions. And if you have questions, feel free to email us at support@golmn, that's GOLMN.com. And we'll be more than happy to get back to you with the answers that you have. Thanks all for spending a few minutes of your valuable time with us today, and we hope to hear from you again in the near future.